Welcome. Good day to everyone to another event of our series called Polycrisis of Carbon Democracy Towards a New Global Transformative Social Contract. Today we shift our focus a little bit to Europe, to Germany, and we want to talk about the rise of the right and far right in Europe. And this is because over the last years, we've witnessed a steady rise of the right and far right in Europe, but also particularly in Germany. And this materialized, first of all, in electoral victories. And due to its history with fascism and National Socialism, people often ask, especially with regard to Germany, how is that possible that a far-right party gained so much support? And if we look at Italy, there's a similar question. Same applies for Austria, and we could, continue that list. So therefore, we will shine a light today on these developments. We ask, what are the dynamics with regard to the right in Europe? What is old? What is new? What are the threats of the right and right politics, and what impact do right politics already have? And I'm very glad and grateful that we have a very well-known and guest with a lot of expertise. So our guest and expert today is Anika Taschke. She is a senior advisor for neo-Nazism and the deputy head of the Center for Social Analysis and Political Education at the Rosa-Luxemburg-Stiftung in Berlin. Thank you very much for joining us today. And this event will take place in form of a talk between Anika and myself, or rather I will ask Anika questions and she will tell us more about the right and the far right. And after that talk, there will be room for engagement and questions. So you can just write your questions down in the chat and we will then come back to them later. Okay, then let's start. Thanks again, Anika. If we look at Germany, then and we see the right. I mean, it's not an homogeneous actor, right? So there are many different actors on different levels. Internationally known, also due to the broad popular support, which materializes in electoral victories, is the so-called Alternative for Germany, AfD. But right actors do not only exist since the founding of the AfD. So the question is, what kind of far-right actors are there in Germany?
Thanks, Janine. Thanks for having me. Welcome, everyone. I tried to write this down. I put a small presentation together. I can share my screen with you all so that you can see a list of weird names we have for far-right parties. I'm not having a full list of right-wing movements or actors like fully in Germany, but we can talk about it a little bit because I hope you can see this. And I have to rearrange my computer because otherwise I cannot see anything. But so when we look at the party level, because that's one of the most interesting ones right now, and you named it, they're really popular. The AfD is very strong, very highly voted right now. But it's not the only actor we have. So we have other right-wing parties. I start from the last one. It's the Third Way, it's called. It's a very right-wing extremist and weaponized party. They do go for elections, but they also have a huge youth sports club movement. You can see them also in Berlin on streets and parks where they do boxing trainings for other people. They're that's the weapon armed we have on party sides. It's very dangerous. They don't have any parliamentary seats right now. They never had. So that's also important. I think they won't, hopefully, but it's important to name them because they're very important for the youth and how to connect with them. Because that's what we see in Germany. I will talk about later on. that young people and young voters vote for the right-wing extremist parties right now a lot. Everyone is like curious about why this is. I think we have to have some more analysis on this, but that's like important to know. We had also, it's called Die Rechte, it's the right. They had the same logo as the left. So they copied the left party logo into their right logo. What's interesting to see, and the same layout. And they disappeared mostly. So we haven't seen them for a long time. Then we have the Republicans. So it's not the same as we have in the US. They just called the same. We haven't seen them in a long time. They had like ups and downs in their parliamentary seating votes. It's interesting to see the evolving, but with all the others you have with the AfD as a strong party in Germany with a lot of parliamentary seats, with a lot of people working for them, with a lot of money going in, you have seen that others disappear. So we always had right-wing parties after 1945, so after World War II, we always had them. We had one party which was forbidden in 1952 because of like following party names after Second World War. So we have historically, we have, of course, the possibility to forbid parties. You can, let's say, get rid of them. It's a very difficult procedure, but with like the socialist Rice Party, like it's in 1952, it happened. And that would also people try to forbid the NPD. It's called here, it's National Democratic Party. That's what they call themselves. And now they changed their name into Die Heimat. So it's Homeland Party right now. They have been in the European Parliament, and they had seats also in one state parliament in East Germany after 1999. So after the unification of both German parts, they were really strong in the 60s in West Germany, and then they came for the unification, really strong in the eastern part, had a lot of local organizations, but now people try to forbid them. So it's a very difficult parliamentarian organization to do that. And the highest court we have in Germany said, you cannot do that because they're not important enough. So they were out of parliaments already. They had less structures. AfD was always on the rise. So it did not happen, but they don't get paid like from the official government anymore. So in Germany, if you have some parliamentarian seats and if you get an amount of votes, you get back like funding for your election polls and everything else from the state. And this is not happening with the NPD nowadays. So now we had this history of like long history of right-wing parties, also always compared and together with right-wing actors on streets, like right-wing violence in a lot of parts of Germany. People get killed because of different skin tones or coming from abroad, whatever. So right-wing movements and right-wing terrors are real and have been real for a real long time in Germany now. But with the rise of the AfD since 2013, it changed a little bit because everyone walks towards them. So we will talk about the election results in a second, but it's very important that we had always right-wing parties, right-wing movements. Some actors are still there and some like went to AfD. Some people already left again AfD because what we see with the AfD is that they radicalized themselves within these 11 years we have them right now. And they have been like radicalized really harshly so that all the European parties and all the European other states you just named, Janine, like Austria or Hungary, for example, try to not engage with the AfD on a like open level because it's a really harshly right-wing racist radicalized party, and nobody, like Italy, nobody wants to like sit next to them because it's not too cool for the other right-wing parties in the European Union to do that.
Thank you. So it is even more surprising, actually, if we then look at the results they got at elections. So if we look at the last election on the federal level, that was in 2021, they got 10.4%. But this is nothing compared to what they won in the state elections last month. So in Thuringia, they got 33%. In Saxony, they got 31%, and in Brandenburg, they got 30%. So that is on the state level, but this level is quite important in Germany as well. So from what you just said, why is it that the AfD have so much support in Germany? Where is the AfD exceptionally strong, and why is that?
So I tried to get you some pictures for what you just said. We had like elections in 2021, and it's important to see that because AfD got 10%, but they lost 2.2%. It's really important to notice. I already forgot about this because people were like somehow released that it's not a win, like 10% more or whatever. And now we got the state elections you just mentioned in Saxony, Thuringia, and Brandenburg, really important states, but it's all Eastern Germany. So it's all former GDR states, which is important for the historical context of these states and also for the election polls we just got. So I brought them with us. Not so nice results. The right-wing movements and also the AfD are very happy about it because what happened is that we have in Saxony the AfD with 30.6%, which is quite a lot. And it will be a little bit difficult. We talk about later, Janine, that how to people like coalitions, that what people do in Germany, having coalitions together, try to govern the state. So that's what this parliamentarian seats look like right now. It's a very difficult thing to explain, but if you have questions, I can do that. Because if you want to have the majority of the seatings within this parliament, and this is where it gets like really close together, because the CDU, like the Social Democrats, the Christian Union Party have like 41 seats, and the AfD for the right wing have 40 seats. So you need the majority for govern. And that's like quite interesting right now. That's why I brought the picture with us. The same we have in Thuringia, where we had a left minister president right now. So we had them. It was a left majority. And now the AfD is like the winner of the state election with 32.8%, which is a lot. And they could govern, but also the same appears that they don't have the majority by themselves. So they have to find someone who does a coalition with them. So you ask why and where they are like mostly very important. It is D3. It's Saxony. I brought this. It's Saxony, Thuringia, and Brandenburg. It's also, and that's important for the whole picture, it's also Bayern, and you have it Bavaria, it's in the south of Germany. It's not an eastern state part. So that's very important to notice. It's not just an East German former GDR problem, like we call it problem, but it's also having some issues in the other states. And that's very important to notice. The question is why. So why is a little bit more complicated. If we had to have the perfect answer for this, I think we would have also find results to solutions to get rid of this problem. But what we can see is the decent part got some very important economic losses after the unification in 1999 and 1990. Like we have West Germany and East Germany coming together in 1989, 1990. And it's important because this process of coming together as like one German country was very difficult for a lot of people living in GDR, former GDR, and now in East Germany. So a lot of people moved from East Germany to West Germany. So you also have losses of people living there, and therefore you have economic losses as well. And what the AfD does is telling a story that they care about East German identity. They want to have them on like the rise of a German country, and they want to get rid of those losses of unification. They do this on an emotional level. They don't do this on policy level. That's very important to know. And it's a paradoxon we're talking about a lot in Germany, because people vote for the AfD even though they don't do policies for them. You don't get more, I don't know, like less rent and higher money or wages because you vote for AfD, even though you have to think about it, but it's not happening. And they, on an emotional level, like on an affirmation level, the AfD does connect to all those people, telling them, if you vote for us and we see you and we see your losses and your identity as East Germany, we want to have equality in the whole country. If you vote for them, we can make it happen. And they do it on a racist answer and solution level, because what they say is you get more money, better wages, better life quality if you get rid of immigration, refugees coming here. And it's an easy answer for everyone. Like if you think that it's working like this, that you have, I don't know, easier, it's easier to get a flat in Berlin if all the immigrants or refugees are not here, and you think that, then you can vote for the AfD. But it's actually not happening and it's not working like this. But these are the answers you get. And it's so easy that people quite like the answers and try to, and then vote for the AfD, and also as a protest against the government we have right now. But everyone knows, and that's what also polls say, everyone knows that people vote for AfD even though, or because they know it's a hard right-wing party. So the former years, everyone said they'd vote for them, but they don't know how racist and right-wing they are. It changed to everyone knows that, and people vote exactly because of that. So that changed, but it's very difficult to look into why people vote for AfD. It's not finished yet to find those answers, but it's important to know that they do in a big majority within these states. And that's why these 3 states elections we just had are very important for the next election, the federal election we have next year, because that's hopefully not the same, but we had an exit poll yesterday which said that we are like 20% for federal level. So we saw 10% over here. And yesterday, the exit poll for next year's federal elections had 20%. So you have a top, like an increase of 10%, which is really important to work with this right now.
And considering what you just said about the maybe possible election results for the AfD in the next federal elections or the general elections next year, and also if we look at the results they got in the last state elections, it is, for now, we can say that despite these electoral victories, the AfD does not govern in any state or on the federal level? You just explained or you just have shown us the seat in parliament and how much seats you need for a majority. So it seemed like it is almost impossible to form a coalition without the AfD. So far, as I said, they are not part of any government. Could you please explain the dynamics around this coalition building processes in Germany, especially with regard to the AfD, and answer the question, why is the AfD not part of it? And yeah, the question is, I think, should we say so far they are not part of it? So do you expect that there might be a coalition involving the AfD in the future? And if so or not so, how do you put those developments into a historical context?
Yeah, it's an interesting question I'm working a lot on right now, because if you can see this seating chart for Thuringia state election we had in September, it's getting very difficult to build coalitions. And normally we have coalitions with two partners, maybe three, like two big ones, one smaller partner, and then they try to have a coalition contract working for the next 4 or 5 years in politics. And it's getting really difficult, but this is important to notice that the Christian Democratic Party, the black one here, has 23 seats and has a contract with themselves, I would say, not working together with the left one. So the pink, I don't know whether you can see my mouse, but the left one with the 12 seats is the left party, and Christian Democratic cannot work with them together. That's what they say, and that's what they do for a long time, because they don't want to work with extremists. That's what the politics of they are and is for a really long time. So they don't work with the right and with the left. That's what they say. So it's not possible for the Christian Democratic Party to work with the left, but they have to work with the Social Democrats, the red one, and the Bündnis Sarah Wagenknecht, which is like got off the left party. It's one of the latest histories we had, but it's still not enough seats for the majority of this parliament. So the CDU has to decide whether they work with the left party or they work with the AfD as a right-wing party, and then they would have like fully majority. They would no problem at all, like for govern the state. But because of their own sanctions don't work with the AfD or the left party, it's getting very, very difficult. And it's important because after World War II and the whole time shift we have right now, there is a saying on the federal level: nobody and no party works with the right-wing party together. Not at all. Like on no level. And that's what every party keeps saying. So the Social Democrats, the Christian Democrats, the left wing, the Greens, these are the most important parties on the federal level, and everyone says we're not working together with the right-wing party. So we call it, I wrote it down, we call it Brandmauer. I wrote it down on the hashtag in the headline. So it's cordon sanitaire in a lot of French-speaking countries. It's the same thing, that people try to ignore right-wing parties, even though they get a lot of seats, and all the democratic parties work together. We did a study on is this real? Is this really happening, that nobody works with them together? So I brought the picture, even though it's not the topic today, but on a local level, people actually work together already, because people on the local level think that's not important. Party politics is not important. And what's the problem with working with the right? So we did the study. It was really a successful study because we found a lot of cooperations together, like with the Christian Democrats and the AfD. But that's exactly the discussion we have right now. Is it possible to ignore the right wings in the parliamentarian, I would say, in the parliamentary work, or do they have to work together? And these are, from the left perspective, I would say, it's very important to say that leftist people and leftist parties try to not engage with the AfD, because if you work with them, they get normal. You get normalized that you have right-wing parties and right-wing politics in your parliamentarian system. And the AfD is a not democratic party. So if they can, they would rid off democracy and our judicial system. They would change the law, change the media. So it's not democratic what they want. And if you work together with them, you help them actually getting their way up to exactly the system. And that's why we have a huge discussion about the Brandmauer. It's like the firewall to the AfD. And if you work together with them, the firewall cracks and they get the whole amount of politics and policies in the parliamentarian area. So that's our discussion right now. I'm not so sure about the 3 state elections we mentioned, and we're talking about how they will evolve. It's very hard discussions. Everyone tries to figure out who's working with them, what are they working for, what could be similar positions to work for the next 4 years. But right now, with a huge polarization towards the right, we have a huge problem to figure out whose coalitions we have. And I didn't mention Brandenburg, but Brandenburg is really important as well, because the Greens and the left didn't come into the into the parliament. So there's a really huge gap in left progressive parties, and we don't have them in the state parliament anymore. So there will be a huge right-wing shift, even though nobody talks with the AfD or don't works with them officially together. But we have to look into it the next 3, 4, 5 weeks, and hopefully coalitions will be able to put together for another working session for the next 4 years in those states.
And so we've learned now that Germany has a big problem with far-right parties, and also, even though I don't want to say and far-right policies, because I mean, they are not really, as you also said, they are not really proposing policies in a sense that would, you would think of, but they are more proposing policies which are very destructive and not really and they don't make sense. That's another thing. And I think one of the problems we face is that, unfortunately, Germany is not the only country in Europe in which the right and far right gain support. We have seen a political shift to the right in many member states within the European Union. And I think most of us are aware of the closed door policy of the European Union, which is not really new. I think that's also part of the truth, but definitely has been escalating quickly in the last months and years. So there is talk about the so-called migration deals, for instance, because I think this is one of the biggest concerns of Europe, like refugees. And then there's also the far right obviously loves that topic. And so these migration deals are not really, they were negotiated under conservative parties and not under far-right parties, what you might assume. So how does the growing support of right-wing and far-right parties manifest itself in policies at the European level?
Yeah, as you said, it's not new, but I brought a map with me because it's still important to see that Europe has a whole shift to the right. These are the election polls for the right-wing parties within those countries. Even though 10% AfD for Germany looks like nicely in compared to other states, but it's important to know that everyone gained a lot of voter support. It changed a lot. Austria is not the actual number here because they had elections 2 weeks ago. And the right-wing party won, like intensely. They won on a really important level. But we have the whole shift in a lot of European countries, and we have a lot of right-wing governments in Europe. So that's also very important. And then we had European Union elections this year, and I tried to figure out how many right-wing fractions do we have in the European Parliament right now. It's very difficult because they change from like month to month, and everyone is trying to figure out to work with whom. But we had some new changes, and it's important that the alternative of Germany, and that's why I said it, that the AfD is too radical for a lot of other right-wing governing parties from the other countries like Italy or Poland, but also the Fidesz in Hungary and also the FPÖ in Austria try not to work too closely together with the German AfD because they radicalized itself in a really, really bad way. And it's too much radicalization towards a right extremist wing party, and that all the other parties try to get rid of the AfD. So we have a new fraction, the European of Sovereign Nations, which is like put together by the AfD newly after the European elections this year. And so we have a lot of them. It's 187 seats of 720 seats. It's important to know that. So we have a shift, but as you mentioned, it's not just a right-wing shift because of a lot of seats for the right-wing parties, but we also have a shift within the, I would say, Christian democratic parties all over the place, because what they do and what they're forced to do is to change policies in the EU in favor of right-wing parties. And it's not happening also, it's happening with right-wing parties, but it's not because they govern in the European Union. No, they don't. But still, everyone else tries to copy their policies for getting the same success as they do. But studies show actually that this is not working. So if you try to copy policies the AfD wants, and especially like racist policies for migration pacts and everything else, the AfD wins, and not like Christian Democrats don't get more voters to their side because they do right-wing policies. And that's very important and to notice for the European Union level. I would say, and you mentioned it before, that we get tighter border policies and like really tight. So we have like border policies and border control in Germany again, which is not usually happening because the EU, within the EU, you don't have border controls because that's how the EU works, right? You can work and go from one country to another. Normally you have the same currency, so you can travel around. For economic reason, companies work together. It's very easy flowing. But Germany just put border control back in place. So you have a shift towards national countries again, even though you have the European Union as a building. All those right-wing and right parties try to get back to national sovereignty and tries to get back to the control over migration, what means that they put border controls in place again. But you also have a lot of money put into the border control for the EU. So if you try to get from Africa to the through the Mediterranean Sea to the borders of the EU, it's the most deadly border we have in the world, and it's not possible to enter Germany, like Germany and Europe as right now. It's very difficult. You get imprisoned like immediately if you don't have a good reason to come to Europe. So they try to get this in They call it order, and do they have really high security policies on this? And they try to shift, as I said, towards national sovereignty. So the whole European Union concept, working together, like getting away from national sovereignty, is shifting back towards national sovereignty, because right-wing policies, right-wing governments from the national governments try to shift back to their power into their hands. And with the right-wing parties, we get a lot of European Union skepticism or criticism. People want to get rid or change the European Union. So you can see also with the getting back to national sovereignty, people try to shift to EU as a, I would say, as a concept, bringing people together, but not as a policy concept anymore. So if you follow this along, it will change the whole European Union, and maybe the European Union itself would get less power and less centralization of the EU. And then you can see with like conservative and right parties that the like Green New Deal and everything about climate change gets a little bit less in place. So people try to get rid of those policies, try to loosen up the tires around climate change policies, and try to get energy independencies for their own countries, but not as a together concept within the EU. And then, I don't know, it's very important to notice that we get some laws because of the right-wing majority we have in a lot of countries is against LGBTQ rights, it's against women's rights. We have a whole discussion about, I would say, which university has feminist histories, like studies or LGBTQ studies. So we get also with like peace in Poland, but also the Fidesz in Hungary, also the AfD in Germany, they shift towards anti-feminist policies, and we can see that. And the conservatives are not closed doors to all those policies, because they're saying that that's like the part where they can work together, even though they don't work together officially. But the Christian Democrats and all the other Christian parties are close to right-wing policies in those cases. So they try to also do not implement more liberal laws for gay marriage or whatever. So they get back from this, and we have a rollback in all those policies. And then we have a huge discussion, but it's actually everywhere in the world, about how to evolve in wars, like the war of Russia and Ukraine. So we have a huge discussion about how to do that, but within always a defense mechanism to how people get to Europe. And Ukrainian people could flee to Germany really easily, and they got like asylum for quite a while here. But now the whole shift is backwards. No, they have to like, they just can stay if they have a workplace and if they have a contract here. Otherwise, like everyone needs to get out. So also the polarization of this war and the solidarity everyone calls about the Ukrainian people is getting a shift back and a rollback in the European Union, and also because of right-wing movements, not just in Germany, but all over the place. So I would say these are the most important things. We will see how the European Union works for the next years. Orban was in the European Parliament yesterday, so he also talked about his strategies for the European Union. Hungary is a right-wing state. It's not really a democracy anymore, but he's still part of the EU. He has no free media, no free law system anymore in Hungary, and we will see how many states and countries try to copy that. And if the European Union as itself, like as the parliament, can stop those strings attached to other countries. We will see about this, and then we talk about also their foreign policies, if they get countries in, or if the whole European Union will grow itself, or will it get smaller? So these are things we have to look at in the future.
Thank you, Anika. And you also said that unfortunately, what we are seeing is that many parties, especially conservatives, but definitely not only conservative parties, adopting far-right, right-wing demands and policies. And I think that's happening a lot in Germany and in Europe. And one of the, I think one of the policies of that, or which are related to that, are these migration deals, which are they're not new, but I think they are now also, evolving to a very anti-human rights system. Could you please tell us a little bit more about those migration deals? How do they work, and what does it say about the human rights situation in the EU?
Yeah, if I would be honest, I would say human rights. Nobody cares about human rights in the European Union anymore. It's a little bit, we get out of the concept because human rights say that you, as a human, and you get out of war or you have a political situation somewhere in your country, let's say LGBTQ rights are violated, you're gay and people want to kill you, you have a problem in your country, you have the right to flee. And where you going is the huge discussion we're talking about. It's not anymore that you have the right to on the move, but people in European Union, they don't care about it anymore. So what we can see is that we have a migration deal. Formerly, we had the Dublin system. So that means the country you enter first, you have to seek for asylum. So, and the European Union, you have to go to Greece, Italy, some parts of Spain, but that's like the Mediterranean Sea coast border. And actually, it's not possible to cross that anymore. A lot of ships will get stopped. You will get imprisoned on one of the islands outside of the coastal border. So that's what's happening right now. So even the Dublin system, so where you start or where you entered, you seek for asylum, is off. Even though they tell you that it's still in place. But Italy was complaining. We have Meloni, a right-wing party member and also governor of Italy. Spain is also under huge distress of talking about migration. All the civil fleets we have in the Mediterranean Sea trying to help people on the move, and all the actors, like the non-NGO scene, is criminalized and violenced. People are afraid to work, for people on the move, try to get also law help if you come here. So we have this problem that it's very difficult to enter the European Union, and then you get registered and you get imprisoned mostly. So it's a fast system to get you out, but also to keep you out of this. And the second thing we can see, and it's actually in contrast to what they agreed on the migration pact, because they wanted to try a little bit more fairness, I would say, for the coastal countries, because everyone, mostly people come to Italy or Spain or Greece, also over Turkey. Turkey is not EU member, so they try to get from one border to another, and agreed that also Germany takes some people, and also Poland without a coastal border takes some people. So they try to get some shift from the southern coastal countries back to the main part of the European Union. And now also with the border controls within countries, also Austria has border controls now. Germany got border controls back in place. It's not even possible to have people moving within the EU because so I did that 2 weeks ago. I tried to get from Austria to Germany, and they stopped the bus and checked everyone So it's not even possible that if you stay in the EU and you got an asylum process, that you can move and that you have like on the human rights level, that you go somewhere where you feel safe, where you get health insurance or health, like help in health things. You don't see a lawyer because it's very difficult to get like help in a law way on those border controls. So you a little bit stick to yourself on those ways. And in the German debate, you never talk about human rights. You don't talk about why people flee from their countries, why they're on the move towards Europe, and that they deserve a better life. Nobody talks about it. The right-wing concept of racism and we need to get those people out, like totally got all over the place. Even the Social Democrats probably tried to like also put this new law in place. They are like the Social Democrats have been ordered the border control back to Germany. So there's also the conflict between like Germany and the EU because the EU wants to have strictly border controls outside of the EU. But if people come here and they have the right to be here in their knowledge and in their sense that they can move from one place to another so that you have a fair evaluation of people within the EU. But Germany also like does close doors now. So you don't have the move within European Union. So there's a lot of fighting between EU and Germany right now. And also Poland and Netherlands said you cannot just close your borders. That's not how EU works. Because it's also a problem for people working in the Netherlands and living in Germany or whatever, because we also have like people moving for work. People do live across the border, and that's also not possible anymore. It's very difficult. It got very difficult, like to travel or to go to work when you live close to the border. So it's a little bit in process how this will evolve. I have the feeling that we need more NGOs on human rights for looking into it, like what's happening on the borders. How are people imprisoned? For how long are they imprisoned? Do they get fair asylum processes? Do they have a chance to see lawyers, translators, everything? And we have those NGOs and we had a lot of them, but people get criminalized, sanctionized, and like big fees of money because people think that they are like smugglers. That's the most topic we're talking about. Then like the NGO scene also, like we have the Sea-Watch, for example, or Open Arms, like civil fleet ships within the Mediterranean Sea trying to help people in distress. They get they fined, criminalized, also in prison, get huge court trials, and it's very difficult. And we need the scene and also like journalism and press to look closely into the human rights situation in Europe. But I think it's violated very hard, even though the right-wing parties are not in place yet. And it's a huge discussion. I think we have to shift actually to UN level for talking about the situation in Europe right now.
Thank you, Anika. With that, you already touched a little bit on the question, what is necessary to overcome that situation, to move back. And this was particularly now for the human rights situation of refugees in Europe. But in your opinion, in general, what could and how should counter strategies against the rise of the right look like? I know it's a very broad and
it's the hardest questions.
Yes, but I'm sorry, I have to ask that.
That's okay. So from a leftist perspective, normally we say that we need either social infrastructure within all the countries we have. For the German perspective, we talk about infrastructure and ways of how to get to work, so that train stations or their buses, is there like an infrastructure to go to instead of having to use the car. I know it's different in some African countries, But here it's very important if I need a car, if I can pay for it, if I like, is it impossible to have one or two, or do I have a train station close to mine? And it's the same for all the health issues. We don't have doctors all over the place where you can go to if you're sick. And we talk about the social infrastructure, also like, I don't know how to call, but grocery stores, health issue things. You need train stations, like you need the whole infrastructure where you live and how you can live there. And it got worse and worse during the last 30 years. But it's a left perspective to say social infrastructure would help to like get people, I don't know how to say this, but happier with their lives, and then they don't feel not being part of the society, because that's the discourse we have over here, to say I'm not worth it because politics does not take care of me at all anymore. So I have a bad feeling about it, and I vote for right wing. Like in a nutshell, I vote for right wing parties. And the feeling of being left behind, we have to get rid of. And it's very difficult because people feel like being left behind, even though they aren't. So if you look at their wages, there are a lot of studies about it. If we look at their wages, that they have a house, they have a car, they live close by doctors, infrastructure, etc. We have the problem that they feel like left behind. And this feeling, to address that, is very, very crucial and very difficult to do. I think we have to talk about young people voting for right-wing parties. We have to talk about social media strategies. I know not everyone is in favor of going live on TikTok or doing stuff over there and, I don't know, dancing and also having politics on the social media accounts. But we have to give also young people another future. And that's very difficult because they grow up with COVID, and then we have this war, like the war from Russia and Ukraine is very important over here. They don't know how their future would look like. So they're very, very depressed. That what they keep selling, that the younger generation is the depressed generation. And I think it's important to get those back to a democracy way of talking about it and to like participate in our society. And we have to, but also on the left-wing perspective, it's important to get another vision of how do you want to live, right? We cannot go from crisis to crisis to crisis. We have a climate crisis going on like heavily. So we have to get another picture out there how our society could be structured and working together with the participation of everyone and trying to get like everyone together on a social level and try to get on an equal level for rights and work and human rights, etc. But it's not so easy because who is the actor of telling the story, of telling the left vision, another solidarity vision for the future? I think it's a difficult question, and it's a lot of different levels we have to address. And for the German perspective, I think it's very difficult to get in touch with a lot of people, right? If you want to get involved or in contact with people who are voting for the rights, I actually don't know where you meet them and where you get in discussion with them. And then you have a fair discussion with like arguments and you try to connect with them or win an argument. It's not really possible right now because people are emotionally like on two sides of the street. People are not talking to each other anymore. The rooms, like the rooms where you meet and where you talk with each other, also with your neighbors, are missing. So it's like a little bit more difficult to get in touch with people and try to figure out how we change also our parliamentarian democracy to get more people involved. so that they don't feel threatened or left behind in the whole politics stuff. And I know it's complicated, so there's no easy answer, and it's not the golden answer at all, because if I would have the recipe to change that, I totally would use it. But it's one of the biggest questions we have to face. We have to face this actually in whole Europe. And if you look at the US, it's probably the same question, and we try to figure out the same answers, but it's a global issue we have to face. And I think if we accept that we have a problem with right-wing politics, it's one step ahead, because then we can address that. And then we can try to figure out what's missing and what's might be helping in this situation. But if you have a clue, I'm totally fine to hear that.
Thank you, Anika. I think it gave us at least a vision for change. Thank you very much. That would be the end of our talk, but there are already questions in the chat. I will read them out, and then what do you prefer, one at a time or maybe two?
I can try to read them, but maybe you also, I don't know whether I can see all of them.
Yeah, I will read them
Nice.
also
Yeah.
for the recording. So one is, hi Anika, thank you so much for such an interesting talk. At the political level, do you see the possibility of a grand coalition in Germany similar to what we saw in France, but to try to prevent the AfD from further advancing? Number one, and then number two, are there any other progressive societal forces that can stop the advance of the right-wing forces in Europe through building alternative narratives, for instance, the trade unions?
All right. It's nice that you ask about a grand coalition, because what we call grand coalition is totally different in Germany, but I know what you mean. Like what we saw in France, and I'm not so sure whether it worked out so well, is that leftist and left-wing people try to get together, even though it's hard for them to get together on one table and agree on politics or policies together. We talked about a lot whether it's possible to get so many people on one table against the right wing. And I think it's less possible than in France, without trying to be as depressive as everyone else. But it's very hard to negotiate with Social Democrats and the Greens, for example, right now on migration politics. We don't get, like, the left party is right now the only one who's not saying the same things about migration and that it's bad for the European Union or Germany as everyone else. Everyone else, like every single party, says we need closed borders, we need like to get rid of those people who are here. Everyone else does this, except for the left party, and that's why the left is like left out of all the discussions. And because of the historical context we have in Germany, and also the Christian Democrats not working with extremists together, it's very difficult on a party level to get those, as that's what we try to do, like a democratic party, not in party sense, like, but to get a force against the far right on the parliamentarian level. But I'm not so sure if this would work in Germany right now. But we also have less left parties than France had, right? People got together from different levels of different left-wing groups and parties, and we just have one left party, which is not strong right now. And for your second question, because that's important as well, we have the trade unions who try to figure out how to manage also their members and not to get AfD voters and AfD members too closely to their trade unions. But the big, like we had huge demonstrations in the beginning of this year like with 1 million of people on their streets against the far right and against the AfD. But actually it did not work so well. So we had this huge demonstrations. We had some on like different grounds. We had like people organizing themselves against the far right. But now with all the elections like being over, we saw that it didn't help at all, or at least less than we thought it might. So it's important how to get a discussion up and how to stay informed about right-wing movements and right-wing parliaments and parties in Germany, and how we get look closely and also being like really angry and trying to protest against it. But I have the feeling that all the other parties normalize the migration discourse, and that's why they also normalize the AfD. So if we say the AfD is racist because they want to get rid of all migrants in Germany, that's what they plan and that's what they're policing for. And everyone else is talking about migration, and we don't get rid of this discourse, you normalize also their position. So it's very difficult, and it has been very difficult to talk about them and to get a nice force against them. I think on the European Union level, it could be possible to get more trade unions together or different NGOs together for a strong force. But within Germany, I'm not hopeless. I don't want to say that. We have like grandmothers against the right. They are very fun. It's one of the biggest organizations we have right now. They do a lot of protesting against the AfD. So if you're a grandmother or your grandfather, you just go to the organization in your city and protest and organize stuff against the AfD. That's really cool. And you see some new things evolving, but you also see that it's getting more violent. We had a lot of violent issues against politicians during elections, but also people like migrants get violated, and it's very difficult to be out there in some parts of Germany and try to protest or organize something against the right. So for Germany, we have to change the whole political discourse, but with all other democratic parties. And with the federal elections coming up next year, I think it will be difficult to agree on one thing together.
Thank you. So there are another 3 questions already. I will move on to a question regarding Sweden. It's from Rian Greb. The question is, I know Sweden is not technically part of the EU, but I remember the right had a victory there a couple of months or years ago too. After that, there hasn't been much news that I'm aware of. Are the right in Sweden part of the greater EU rightward shift?
Yeah, I'm not an expert in Sweden politics, but yes, they are. So that's also part. The only shift we haven't seen is Finland, where we got elections where left parties won. But all the others, yeah, we have the shift, and we have a lot of victories on the far right also in Sweden. For me, it's very impressive or very important to look how they work with the far right, because what we call Brandmauer, the firewall towards the right, not working with them together, is totally different in all the other countries. So some people try to work with them for showing their real face and to their real policies, so that next time they don't get voted for. But I'm not so sure how this worked out. Yeah, Sweden is also important because for the migration parts is also very important because they have a coastal border, even though the northern part, and very difficult to reach because of the Baltic Sea region. People look to Sweden and what they do with the migration flowing. And if they get more restrict on the migration level, everyone else also in the European Union does as well. So it's a close, because it's also close to Germany, but it's a closed connection, even though Sweden is a little bit different because of another parliamentarian system.
All right, then we move on to a question from Pali Nates. The question is, what is your thinking about the results of the next general elections? Also, can you speak about the ideology of the AFD and any links to National Socialism and anti-Semitism and racism?
Yeah, thank you, Telly. I have to say that I can try. I'm not very optimistic about the next general election we have, probably in September 2025. The last poll, as I said, is doubling the results for the AFD. So when we had 2021, 10%, we probably, if there's nothing changing too bad or like too worse or better, we probably get the 20% for the AFD, which is a lot. It also depends how we also get elections for the chancellor. So that's very important. We have Olaf Scholz from the Social Democrats right now after Angela Merkel. So it's also important who will win or try to win the election for the chancellor. We have Friedrich Merz from the Christian Democratic Party, but also the AfD also announced that they will go into the run for the chancellor position with Alice Weidel, which is an important figure to talk about because she lives in Switzerland, and which is not very usual for German politicians and not even very allowed to do that. She lives with a woman together and has an adopted child from abroad. So that's very unusual for AfD, but it contrasts the politics, what they're fighting for, right? They fight for, I would say, the normal concept of families. So you have like husband and wife and two nice children. That's what they're voting for. Normally they try to have rollbacks to the concept we saw in World War II in the ideology of National Socialism, that we have women not working and stay in place at home for kids, and family prepping, like all the food stuff and cooking. So it's a very rolled back role model in family issues. We have a lot of anti-Semitism within there. So we had, but it's a long time ago, we had Jews in the AfD, which was a small group to symbolize that they don't support anti-Semitism, but they do also with their politics. They are racist because what they force and what we had a huge discussion about in the beginning of the year is their re-migration plans. That's how they call it. So they want to have, and they want to get rid of everyone in this country who's not German. And there is not German definition goes very much broader, that they don't want to have people here who don't look German. So even though, and you know this from the historical context, don't have to explain to you especially, but we're not sure how they would do this, but I think it would look closely to what we already experienced in World War II, with getting rid of all Jews and all other foreign life in this country. And they, we have like Björn Höcke, the leader of the AfD in Thuringia, very important person, a former history teacher who quotes sometimes actors of the National Socialism times, pretending not to know that these are forbidden quotes, because it's not always fine in Germany to use those quotes, also not to use symbols from this time. And we have a lot of party members who try to ignore that. Maximilian Krah, the one in the European Parliament, not part of the AfD fraction anymore, said that the SS, so also parts for like the national, for the World War II, who are responsible for a lot of war crimes, SS and Wehrmacht, are nicely parts of the political society years ago, so they also pretend to not know, or they negotiate like to have a smaller part on criminalization of right-wing actors during World War II and what they did. So it's difficult to explain the AfD in a nutshell, but it's not that they don't, so they're not ignoring World War II and what happened with their ideology in Germany, and they never, how to say, they never get rid of like the historical parts. They're always close to them. And if you ask them about it, they normally say something not nice and really stupid. So they're close to them without being the same party as we had before, because they also know if they get too close to the NSDAP in National Socialism times, they will be forbidden, because it's not possible to have the same party or if another party looking the same way. But still we have some and huge issues with them in the historical connection to Hitler and the other actors around.
Thank you. And maybe to add that, because you also asked about the anti-Semitism, I think it is also important to note that many of the chairs of the memorial institutions related to former concentration camps officially announced that they won't, welcome any AfD politicians at their side, because because of their actions, but also because of the words. So there is also a lot of resistance from that side, right? Or was it only like singular cases?
No, I think it's a lot of them. The problem is, and I'm organized for one of the concentration camp sites in Austria, so I know that it could be different. But in Germany, we have those concentration camp sites, memorials, and a lot of other memorials for that time. And you have a board meeting. And the problem within the boards now will be that after the state elections and after the local elections, it could be possible that AfD members or parliamentarians have to get into the boards of those memorial sites. And yeah, the leader, like the director of the Buchenwald concentration camp site, also said, like, you're not welcome here. But the problem is that you have a structure where parliamentarians get into the boards, and then they're part of the board itself, but they're also part of commemorations. We have 80 years of liberation next year, so they could be part, and they will be part. I don't think that they will stay out. There are some sites who say you're not welcome and you actually cannot get into the memorial site, so we will stop you. But we have a huge discussion on how much money do those sites get. So the AfD, together with the Christian Democratic Party, sometimes is stopping on a local level. And if we get into the state level after the elections, I'm a little bit worried about, and they will cancel money for those sites because they don't want to talk about World War II anymore. They don't want to talk about the cruelty happening. So they want to try to get rid of the money for those sites and also the political work within the sites and the people working there, etc. So it's a huge issue on history, politics we're having with the rise of the far right.
Thank you, Anika. And then there's one from Roland. It's a little bit longer. It says, thank you, Anika, for the great analysis and deep dive into the rise of the right. My question really is that examples from many countries show that there is a silent majority drifting rightwards. And they are not doing it because they are poor. These are upper middle class and wealthy people from affluent societies. What is the role of civilizational crisis and the perceived loss of hegemonic power in this rightward drift? Also, I argue that the idea of democracy does not exist in most countries because politicians have become plutocrats and do not really work for the people anymore. What do you think? Thank you, Roland, for the question.
Thank you, Roland. I tried to answer like the first part because you're totally right. It's not the poor's. And that's very important, even though we have, that's what I said, we have people who feel left behind because I don't know why, but they feel like it. And they have also the feeling you raise in your second thesis is that politics don't work for us anymore. We have this discussion about them above us or them up there in the parliament or the politicians in Berlin. We have this gap. But the problem is that some people feel left behind, even though they aren't on an economical level. And that's what I try to say, and it's very difficult for me to explain also in English, but also because literature and studies are trying to figure out what this is, the AfD paradoxon, that people also vote for the AfD, but that's the case for poor people, even though the party will never do something for your economic status and you will not get up and you won't get more wages or whatever. So your situation is stuck. And even though you vote for the right-wing party, getting your situation actually getting worse. And then we have, and I actually don't know the reasons. So the AfD is not a middle class party. It is a rich people's party because they support whatever you want, like lower taxes on stuff. They want to get rid of union and trade unions within companies. So they actually on the employer's side. So they actually try to do politics for the rich and for how we call it, the 1% people up there. They are not renter friendly, they are owner friendly party. And we noticed that it's a little bit weird group. A lot of pilots who get a lot of money in Germany if you work as a pilot for one of Lufthansa or whatever companies. You have huge AfD members and some people who vote for them in this group, and they're really like getting a lot of money. But if you talk about climate change and if you talk about more expensive flights, less flights for some people, we talk about in Germany about cars and is it really necessary that everyone has one and which one you have and how to change also your housing for a more environmental friendly direction. So we have this question of, is your life changing? Because we need to change something before we get like also in the climate crisis, before we get like in a worse situation. So what we talk about with the like also the Greens, but also the Social Democrats is that we have to change. And not just individually, the left parties try to say also the companies have to change their policies when it comes to climate change. But people like feel threatened that they can have 4 cars, a huge villa with a heated pool. And that's the whole discussion we have in Germany. There is a hate about the Greens that they, I don't know, rob your car because you cannot use it anymore. So that's the richer part on the level we have in Germany, but I actually cannot tell exactly why everyone in all these different groups are also voting for the right-wing parties. Because I think it's a little bit more the gray areas between black and white. But we also have multiple problems with what you said, democracy, politics, participation, how to organize democracy and who has more influence. Because if you talk to politicians, they say, I can try that, but also the big companies have a lot of influence, right? So if you're on the right side with a lot of money, with a lot of companies, even in the car industry or something else, they are more powerful than the elected party members in parliament. So that's like the shift we have also in Germany. I think it's better than in other European countries where you can see it. cracking a little bit more. But these are multiple reasons why people are feeling left behind or are really angry about politics and democracy over here, and I don't know, try to get the right-wing revolution, but it's not nice.
Thank you. So far, I don't see any more questions, but please, someone intervene if I'm wrong. I don't think so.
I haven't seen one.
You have seen one?
No.
Okay.
I'm
All
just
right.
curious whether I have to find another positive way of getting out of this talk, because it seems a little bit evil to like paint those pictures about the right and the far right in Germany. But I think we have some good things evolving, even though it's not part of the topic, but it's not all shitty.
Do you want to sum up our discussion? Mention a few of the good things.
It's very hard, but I have the feeling, because that's why I mentioned the protest in the beginning of the year. So we had a huge research going public about the AfD and their remigration plans. And it's Teddy will know, but people who are like close to history in Germany will know they met at the Wannsee in Potsdam. So that's also the place where former Nazis decided to get rid of all the Jews in Germany in World War II. So that's exactly, like mostly exactly the same place where they met, and they met AfD people, but also right-wing big company owners and rich people. That's why I said rich and wealthy people, and also some people from CDU, from Christian Democratic Party, and some like close to the Christian Democratic Party. And we had a huge research coming up, going public about this meeting. And afterwards, millions of people went for demonstrations in all cities and smaller villages, even though some villages never had demonstration before. As we had them for the first time. You had a huge variety of people never been on demonstrations. You had the younger people, you had like, I would say my generation with kids, where they said, I don't want to have this future for my children. You had the queer community coming out, less the migration community, because they were afraid of big demonstrations, which is totally fine with all the violent happening right now. But you had people together, and also the climate organizations like Fridays for Future shift towards, I would say, an anti-fascist against right-wing policy right now, because also they know climate crisis happening, and we have to we have to face it in policy terms. But we also have the right, which will have a huge role back in climate policies if they empower. So we have also the climate crisis movement, and also the climate movement, really young people, really cool people on the streets for this, also the unions. And so we have a huge, and I wished for it a long time. So that's probably why I'm very optimistic about it, that we have people together fighting against the far right, who never fought together, because they said, okay, we're doing the queer rights and we're doing climate things and rights and we're doing human rights, but now we have together all those groups on streets. And even though the demonstrations are over and it got less powerful in total, I think it shifted towards a lot of organizations coming up now. So we have in all those cities where you had those demonstrations, you see that people doing more work, more events on the far right and their policies, their ideologies. People try to get on TikTok and try to get rid of right-wing narratives over there. So a lot of things are happening, and I hope, especially for the federal elections 2025, that this will like have another increase in people being aware of what's happening if you vote for the far right. Even though we face a Christian Democratic Union and being maybe the next majority party, which copies right-wing policies right now, and they totally just copy and paste the whole program of the AfD. That's my feeling right now. So even though we don't need the AfD in parliament and in government, there will be the problem. But I'm very grateful for all the people who do protest and to try to get things organized against the far right in Germany. And I hope that over the winter times and maybe next summer coming up, people organize themselves even more for the upcoming election. And then I hope that we have success in a push against the far right.
Thank you, Anika. That was at least something to look forward to. I would really like to thank you for your time today and being here with us and tell us more about the worrying things, but also give us a little bit of hope. I think that was really enlightening. At least it was for me, but I'm sure it was for all of us. Thank you very much, Anika. Thank you also to all the participants. Using your time for that very depressing but even more important topic. Thank you very much. And I think the next event of the series will take place on the 25th of October already, and it will be around the upcoming BRICS summit and the impacts for the climate crisis in relation to the BRICS. And our speaker will be Professor Patrick Bond. So if you're interested, then also please join us. And then I wish you a wonderful evening, morning, wherever you are. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.